I want to tell you something that's interesting. It's interesting to me. It might be interesting to you. I want to tell you about how a pop singer named Jimmie Rodgers and a rock musician named Tommy James and a label owner named Morris Levy, how these people are all connected. It's a pretty interesting story. We're going to start with Jimmie Rodgers here. Jimmie Rodgers was a huge pop star in the 50s and early 60s. He had several hit records. He had successful tours, numerous television appearances. Kind of a happy-go-lucky guy, sort of country-flavored pop. You can find him on YouTube easily enough. It's no problem. His biggest hit, Honeycomb, which you can also find on YouTube, was released on the Roulette label. And it stayed at the top of the charts for weeks and was awarded a gold record. The singles did well overseas, not just in the States, and the future looked pretty bright for him. Then suddenly not so bright. Most people these days don't know who Jimmie Rodgers is. I mean, he was a star when I was, a little kid. I mean, I don't remember him. I just know of him. He had a really just a bizarre thing, this bizarre incident happened in 1967. In this incident, he was stopped on the San Diego freeway at night by an off-duty LAPD officer. And he was beaten so severely that he couldn't perform at all for over a year afterward. He suffered a traumatic brain injury, TBI, among other injuries, fractures in facial bones, things like that. The off-duty LAPD officer in question claimed that he had pulled Rodgers over that night because he was driving erratically. And that Rodgers had gotten out of the car, and then Rodgers had fallen down and sustained all his injuries that way. But then suddenly it was disclosed that two other LAPD officers were also on the scene at the same time, and after Rodgers fell, they put him back in his car and just left. A friend of Rodgers, he was concerned that Rodgers was not yet home, and he went looking for him up and down the freeway. He was driving up and down the San Diego freeway, and he saw his car finally. Found him in his car, all bloody, very bloody, slumped across the front seat. They took him to the hospital, and according to the blood test they did as part of his treatment, Rodgers was not inebriated at all. Unfortunately for Rodgers, he was beaten so badly he couldn't remember anything after he was pulled over. And man, this was all huge news at the time. He sued the LAPD. They countersued for slander. $13 million slander suit, which that's real money now, but that was a ton of money back in 1967. They went back and forth in court. Finally, in 1973, Rodgers took a $200,000 settlement. That's about $1.5 million in today's money. And the settlement stipulated that the LAPD accepted no responsibility for his injuries. They were just paying him off, I guess, from their perspective as a nuisance suit. But it's all just very suspect, it's all just weird. Some of the testimony was contradictory from the officers. Rodgers prevailed legally, but, he was never the same after that. I mean, he had TBI. He had brain fog for years, and he had to have physical and emotional rehabilitation. Put a big dent in his career, to say the least. That led to him kind of just simply fading away in the public eye. He still performed later, but he was no longer a star. And to this day, it's never been determined what actually happened that night. There was no new information. No one else came forward. Nothing. Zero. Okay. So much, much later, Tommy James of Tommy James and the Shondells, a rock and roll group, popular in the 60s and 70s, he wrote in his 2010 biography, Me, the Mob, and the Music, that Morris Levy, the mafia-connected head of Roulette Records, had arranged the attack in response to Rodgers' repeated demands for unpaid royalties that he was due from the label. So this is 2010, so that's a long time after the incident, right? The incident was in 1967. All of Rodgers' most successful singles had been released by Roulette in the 50s. Roulette was notorious for not paying their artists for their record sales. They didn't pay them mechanical royalties. They didn't pay them songwriting royalties. Add insult to injury, Levy also frequently added his name to the songwriter credits for songs produced on his own label, so that he would receive, some of the royalties, the songwriting royalties, in perpetuity from those songs. This happened with most of the artists on the label. And it's a matter of public record. It happened most often with the black artists on the label because he figured he could get away with it more easily. And he did. He did get away with it. So Rodgers had moved to the Dot label in 1962 and then to A&M in 1966, but he had never let up on Levy for the money that he was rightfully owed for his hits, his big hits. According to Tommy James in the biography, those demands to Levy were what precipitated the savage beating that Rodgers sustained back in 1967. If it was Morris Levy that set it up, then it was a warning. People were afraid of Levy, and with good reason. Tommy James didn't put out his biography until 20 years after the death of Levy, as well as the deaths of other people who worked for Levy. Tommy James stated that he was afraid to put it out any earlier. Basically, this guy Levy was a criminal masquerading as a businessman. Tommy James estimates that he was cheated out of somewhere between $30 million and $40 million. Just him alone. That's not all the acts on the label. Just Tommy James was cheated out of between $30 million and $40 million while Morris Levy was alive. He never said anything. He was completely terrified of Levy. Justice regarding Levy came late. When he was finally convicted of extortion in 1988 as a result of an FBI investigation into organized crime's presence in the music industry. Levy was in ill health by then. His lawyers claimed that prison would kill him. They appealed, they lost the appeal, and 2 months before his 10-year sentence was to start in 1990, Levy died of cancer. That's a crazy story, isn't it? Let me give you an interesting addendum to that crazy story. Years after Levy's death in 1990, a court found Levy's estate liable in 1996 for $4 million in a suit brought by Jimmy Merchant and Herman Santiago of the Teenagers regarding the song Why Do Fools Fall in Love, performed by Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers in 1956. The song had sold over 3 million copies by then, and the two songwriters had received only $1,000 together. They stated that Levy told them repeatedly that they would disappear if they kept asking him about it. They got their $4 million in 1996.